Orthodox Unscripted. I'm Elisa Bielatich Davis, and I'm here today with Luke Gilstrap, and he is with the Orthodox Christian Prison Ministry. And if you've been listening to me for a while, you probably know that I love Orthodox Christian Ministry. I think you guys are just the greatest ministry. Obviously, we're called to visit people in prison. You know, Christ says that in Matthew 25. We don't do it very much. A lot of us never will in our lifetime unless we have family members there, as I have. And I have visited
Yeah.
family members in prison.
Yeah.
But how much nicer to visit everyone in prison, right? But
It's
it's a
hard.
beautiful
Yeah.
ministry.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
really neat. It's
Yeah.
really neat. Now, do you do prison visits, or are you more working in the organization, keeping things together? What do you do?
Yeah. So I am the annual giving manager for Orthodox Christian Prison Ministry. So, on paper, what that means is that I am in charge of fundraising. But with a ministry like this, the way that you fundraise is you just collect stories, and you share these stories with people, and that's really kind of all you have to do because the ministry itself is so powerful, and like you'll hear often from people who are visiting people in prison, who are running Bible studies in prison, and this kind of thing. Like, we when we read Matthew 25:36, we think like it's kind of an imperative. Like Christ is saying, I'm in prison, so you better come find me. Like that's kind of at least that's how I can
Oh,
interpret.
cool. Yeah, that is it,
Uh,
right? Yeah, of
uh,
course.
but there's this like a I don't know. There's a softer, softer and just more invitational way of reading that scripture too, which is to say like Christ has told us where he is. And so if you're going into prison, you know that you'll find Christ there because he said so himself. So my job really is just to take these stories of people who are doing amazing things, both in and outside of prison, including like serving the families of people incarcerated, and just sharing them for the public, encouraging them to donate so that we can continue running programs inside of prisons. So yeah, it's been an amazing job. My first week on the job, my son had just been born, and so I was like wearing him and bouncing him in the carrier while I was on the phone with a man who had served exclusively on death row for the last 12 years. And the stories that he had were just unreal. The stories of like generosity of people on death row, people saving their very meager wages to buy medication for other people on death row. So yeah,
Oh,
I very
beautiful.
very quickly at this job, my mind had to be reoriented toward what is really going on in prison, and I think that was a big catalyst for this book as well.
Oh, that's neat. That's really neat. But what an interesting idea that Christ says, I was in prison and you visited me. And he's really referring to the fact that we find him in other people. And that when we go to prison, I know in the book,
Yeah,
Crazy John, if you ever read this like 10 years ago, was this, like independent Orthodox monastery book that went around and then
sure.
stopped. But it's a great book. And he kept visiting at the hospital. And someone was saying, like, why do you like the hospital so much? And he said, because when people are suffering, God is there. Like
Mhm.
Christ is in the hospital. So I go see Christ in the hospital. And I
Yeah.
thought, that's so true. But that's really true of prison as well, that he's saying he's there and that we can come and find him. And I love that. And I think, so much we forget to look for him, when
Oh
we're
yeah.
talking to people, and we can spend our lives not even noticing where he is. And he really is in everyone. But boy, that is beautiful. That is powerful. And I think people kind of assume there wouldn't be generosity in prison. They assume there wouldn't be beauty, there wouldn't be kindness. And almost, there's a way that we can look at people and just say, oh, that person's a monster. That person's like maybe we're afraid of the fact that we could be, but for the grace of God go I. So instead it's like, well, he's not a
Yeah.
person like me. He's some other thing. He has morphed into an alternate object that is now in prison and I don't have to worry about it because he can't get out. And they're
Oh
not thinking
yeah.
these are really human beings. And I, like I said,
Yeah.
some of us have families where people go to jail sometimes, right?
Yep.
And I have this family, and I know that, we have people who have maybe addiction problems, mental health issues, or just violence going on, that there's this like cycle going on. And so they do end up in prison sometimes. And they're still human beings, and they're still the same person that they were. Like my cousin that I played with when we were 10, when
Yeah.
he was in prison, he was the same guy. And he was
Yeah.
actually, I think in some ways, that time to think and that time to slow down um, causes some really interesting interactions like that. And that requirement, I don't know, what do you think it is that would
Yeah.
cause, like someone obviously would be, violent or having some kind of struggles if they were truly guilty of their crime and went to prison. But then there's all of this generosity on the inside. What do you think happens?
Oh man. Um, well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, it honestly goes back to that first interview with this man who was serving on death row, where he wasn't trying to be oh, I don't, what am I trying to say? He wasn't trying to say anything provocative when he said this, but he told me, people in prison are the lucky ones, because they they aren't lying to themselves anymore. They
Mm,
understand like what's actually the sin and the darkness that actually inhabits them, and then that's that's where you can begin to make a real transformation. The rest of us have like all these filters where we can sort of like
yeah,
mitigate some of that blunt understanding, right? Like,
right.
well, okay, like, I just lashed out at my kids, but I mean, they were, misbehaving. Like, I'm not like really an angry person, or maybe I just did something like really selfish. I kind of like cheated the rules a little bit, but like there were all these other factors at play, that would have
Yeah,
caused anyone to do that. Um, uh, it is it's harder to rationalize that stuff away when you are
right.
incarcerated because the effects are so obvious. And uh, yeah, I mean that was something that I learned a lot from the authors in this essay collection too. Were just that there's a gift in having to really face yourself. And it's not a gift that everyone receives. It's not as if like a transformation inside of prison is inherent. That
Right.
it happens.
No, that's definitely true. I mean,
Uh,
you don't have to
yeah,
pace yourself, right? Like
yeah,
you can
yeah,
do what you do on the outside, which is just kind of
right,
scramble and blame
right,
other people, blame other
yeah,
circumstances. It's almost like it's like being slippery or something, right? You're trying not to be pinned down. And I
yeah,
feel like out here, you don't want people to see your flaws. You don't want people to see your crimes, and
yeah,
you're just and you don't want yourself to see them either. So you keep moving. And there's something about sitting still like that with everything just laid out and everything's been announced and there's nothing to hide anymore. It's just there. I can imagine that for some people, people do accept that gift and reach and sort of lean into it and try to get to know God and know themselves better. But yeah, I'm sure there are some people who don't.
yeah, yeah. I mean, sincerely, one of the most uh, peace. I mean, when I say peaceful, I mean like peace bringing, peace like immersive uh, phone conversations I've ever had.
Yeah.
Uh, was on some with someone in prison who had committed some serious crimes, and uh, but had changed so much that is now, um, you know, at least inside of prison, is more famous for like the counseling he does for people, and uh, yeah, I have to be careful, not to tell that story all the way because I can't ever say it without crying, but the
Oh,
yeah, it was it it's amazing to me how much my perception of people in prison has changed through this work, and I'm yeah, I think when I had a chance to be an editor for this book, that was my hope for everyone who reads this too, is just to have the same kind of like encounter that I've had with people for the last 4 years.
That's beautiful. That's neat. And it makes me think of, like Mother Maria of Paris talked a lot about, ministering to people, just like really opening herself up and really listening to them and attentively and
Yeah.
with compassion and love, right? That kind of real honest dialogue, that she found Christ in it, that she was always forever just finding Christ, finding, the Holy Spirit, peace, all that. That's where she encountered God. And so
Mm-hmm.
she loved it. And so, I'm not surprised that this happens also in prisons and in hospitals. And, she was dealing with people who had a lot of poverty and alcoholism and mental illness and, a really
Yeah.
struggling population.
Mm-hmm.
And, people try, we try to avoid people, when actually, if we could turn and lean into it, like maybe we would find something beautiful. It's an
Yeah.
interesting idea. But wow, okay. So with Orthodox Christian Ministry, you mentioned the book. I want to talk about this because
Sure.
OCPM hasn't done a book before, right? Is this the first time?
Yeah. This is a new thing for us.
This is
Yeah,
cool.
it's the first ever essay collection to come out of OCPM. It's also the first book that we've ever made intended for someone either not explicitly doing prison ministry
Hmm.
or not for someone in prison. So if you go to
Right.
the bookstore on our website, anyone can buy the exact books that we send for free to people in prison. And anytime that you buy those books, you're enabling us to continue to send them for free.
Oh, cool.
But these books are tailored for the prison audience, where the book that is going to come out on Bright Monday this year is a new thing for us. Like I said, to try to encourage people, maybe even before they consider whether or not they're being called to do prison ministry,
Mm.
just to be open to seeing people in prison in a different way, and then kind of having to reckon with yourself about what these people have to teach us. That's
Right.
hard to swallow.
That's
So
neat. Yeah, that's right. You guys write a lot of publications that are like Bible studies and different books on theology and all kinds of things to help a prison population sort of who wants to discover Christ, like learn about Christ in the church. And
yeah,
are they like catechism books essentially, or how would you describe them?
yeah, yeah. We've got a couple different series. There's like a 12-part catechism series that someone in prison can do for free through correspondence. So there's a unit on the early Christians, a unit on different key books of the Bible, the parables of Jesus, this kind of thing. And yeah, it's written for someone who, we're not assuming you come with any kind of like base level knowledge of this material,
Right.
because that's very possible.
I,
But
I'm sure lots of people have like, but some of the people in prison obviously grew up in church or whatever. But
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people reaching out are just kind of thinking about this for the first time, which is neat.
yeah, and I mean, when I say that, I mean, the newness of this catechism can either be like Christianity, that this is an entirely new narrative for you, or like Eastern Christianity, which
Right.
that kind of involves like, I don't know, sort of like uncovering some misunderstandings that you might have about Christianity, and maybe some like of the implications that's had on your life.
Right.
And I mean, I can speak for myself as a convert to Orthodox Christianity.
Right.
Um, and then yeah, but what I want to say too is that even though this material is made for people um, who don't have to have any kind of like prerequisite um, level of understanding, by the end of this material, you do have a pretty deep understanding of Orthodoxy. So, and then even beyond that, we have a partnership with the Saint Athanasius Academy, where you can get
Cool.
essentially a bachelor's degree in Orthodox theology, again, like for free. We
Oh,
do
that's
this
cool.
entirely for free, and I mean entirely. It's we're able to do that from the people that continue to donate to OCPM. So,
Oh,
but
that's neat.
but yeah, we've had people who were in prison, uh, made contact with OCPM, started going through our catechism courses, and then by the time they were released, uh, like I know one of my friends, when he went to an Orthodox church for the first time, uh, the priest was like, you have like almost a seminary level reading experience." Like
Right?
I'm looking at these lists and it's like pretty close to what I had to read to be ordained, you know. So
Oh, that's
so
cool.
yeah, so up until now, that's all the material that we've published is, you know, Orthodox material aimed for people in prison, to encourage their own transformation. But this project is, the first, like, I guess, public facing or first book for people on the outside.
Right. Right. And so this book is called Suffer With You, and it's about forgiveness. So of course, I mean, prison ministry, you're the prisoners have to struggle with forgiveness, right? They may have people they need to forgive, they want to be forgiven.
Yeah,
There are all of these difficulties going on. So it's kind of like an extreme study of forgiveness. And
yeah,
then it sort of turns on you and it's going, well, what's forgiveness in your life? Like what's going on with you? And there's just a whole method for learning how to forgive and learning how to participate in God's forgiveness. Tell me about it. Tell me like the whole thing. How did this start? And
yeah.
tell me about the stories in there and where the vision came from. It's so cool.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, the book is called "Suffer with You: Lessons on Forgiveness from Prison." And it's made up of four parts. The first three parts are essentially like memoir narrative essays, from three people on different sides of the prison system. Um, so the first essay is from Jaden, who, we've featured before with OCPM, and I think has been on your show before.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Jaden's story, I mean, they're all incredible stories.
Right.
um,
Jaden's
but
story is amazing. It's really
yeah,
cool.
um, uh, Jaden, has an essay about how he, I mean, the simplest way to say it is how he eventually forgave and even befriended the man who had murdered his mother. Um, uh, and yeah, well, I can get more into that too. The second essay, is by, Mikhail Markusev, who, um, I don't, even just his writing style alone is very, I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's kind of, I'm always reminded of like Dostoevsky when I read his essay. It's very
Right.
like kind of cinematic.
He's
And
Ukrainian. You can feel it in him, right?
sure,
I
yeah,
think he's got
yeah,
that style, you know.
yeah.
It's
That's yeah. Um, yeah, Mikhail, describes his experience, essentially falling into, kind of a like a life of gang violence, largely fueled by, um, like racial hatred, um, and how, uh, once he was in prison, um, and like we were talking about, received the opportunity that prison had given him, which didn't happen automatically.
right.
Um, how eventually, through God's grace, he used his time in prison, um, to receive Christ's forgiveness for, uh, what he had done, and then use that forgiveness to basically do a total 180 of what had put him there, where he started becoming a force for healing across racial lines on the prison yard, which
Right.
I don't know, I think is arguably one of the most racially segregated places, in the country. You know,
Absolutely.
um,
Well,
uh,
I mean, gangs in prison are different, right? Because there's really like survival on the line, and there's just all this brutality,
Yeah,
and they're all mixed in together. It's like gangs in the world are in their neighborhoods. There's some differentiation. They
sure.
can go home away from them. In the prison, they don't escape each other,
Yeah,
and it's just brutal. But it's really interesting reading. Also, he's just so self-aware, and he
yes,
understands why he was involved in the gang and what he was getting from it, and why that sense of belonging and
yeah,
community and purpose and family meant so much to him that he was willing to just do whatever. Like, it wasn't even a question of whether you would kill someone or do crimes or whatever. It was
yeah,
like, no, you do these things because this is how you be a part. And he just wanted to be this part, and not like he's
yeah,
excusing it, like, oh, I just needed a community, but he's seeing that pull, that he just didn't even look twice. He just went. And
yeah,
it's really powerful. It's interesting if you've ever wondered, how do these things happen? How do people get pulled into a life of crime, into a whole, world of crime? And it's not always what you would think, and I really like the way that he is
yeah,
explaining it, because I think there is a crisis of community, right? Like, we
for
do
sure.
have that problem in our society, and we should really think about, if we don't have loving communities to invite people to, like, where are they going to find loving communities?
What happens?
And,
Yeah, yeah,
like, I mean, maybe there are sometimes gangs, maybe they're not. Maybe it's a soccer team, so they never come to church because they love this. But,
sure.
like, how important it is for us to be a welcoming community, especially to younger people. And
Yeah,
anyway, I thought it was really fascinating.
yeah, yeah. I think the kind of like behind the scenes story of the book, uh, Mikhail and I had the most interaction between like writer and editor, and yeah, I've definitely learned the most from Mikhail too. So I might come back to that too. But the third narrative essay in the book is by Anatolius, who um, if the first, well, I guess I want to say this. The order of the book is very intentional. Okay, so
Yeah.
um, the first two essays are definitely they have a lot of heavy thematic material, but that this the first essay is about watching his mother die, and then being feeling called to forgive this man, and eventually, I mean, bring him to the church. That's heavy. The second essay, like we were saying, is about this man's journey through gang violence, um, how raw it was for him to receive Christ's forgiveness after this experience, and then again feeling called to take Christ's grace and to start being a force of healing where he was. So those first two stories, they're tough, but they're eventually redemption stories. Um, they leave you feeling good.
Right. They have
um,
happy endings, right?
yeah, yeah. The third narrative essay is not that way. Uh, Anatolius writes about how he had committed his crime while serving as a pastor, um, and uh, and I was just blown away by the courage in his essay and the honesty of it to describe what the consequences of that sin were on his family, in particular, and how uh, ultimately, like, there are parts of his family that have forgiven him, um, but that it's not likely that all of his family will forgive him. Most especially his daughter. Um, so that essay, it complicates this question of forgiveness, because um, I guess in a couple ways. The first is when Anatolius is talking about his time in prison, which he's now been released and is counseling people on the outside. Um, but while he was in prison, um, he talked about this idea of victim empathy, and how you he was in these counseling sessions, first like, receiving counseling, and then eventually he started leading these sessions, um, that help you understand that your desire to ask for forgiveness from the people that you have hurt,
Yeah.
might not be as pure as it feels, and might itself be a way to inflict more harm on these people.
Yeah.
Um,
That was a
which,
surprising
whew,
revelation, right? I
yeah,
mean, and he
yeah,
starts going through it and he's like, the Bible doesn't say ask for forgiveness.
yeah,
It says, repent, turn to God for forgiveness. And I just thought, is that true? I'm trying to remember. My
yeah,
gosh, I can't think of a single place where because
yeah,
there's always this sense of like, oh, of course you have to go ask for forgiveness. But it's also true that as a victim of something or someone who's been really wounded,
yeah,
it doesn't, when someone asks for forgiveness, it's different than just coming up and saying, I take responsibility for this. I'm so sorry. And then when you say,
yeah,
please give me your forgiveness, it's like, okay, now give me the golden coin so I can go away and be happy. And
yeah.
it is asking for something like a service or a transaction of
It's
some
like a
kind.
transaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you say that. I think in our modern life, we're just so used to asking for forgiveness. I mean, I would say, especially like in Orthodox circles, I've,
Yeah. Well, look at
since,
Forgiveness Sunday, right?
right,
Like
right,
the whole
right.
day
Like,
dedicated to it.
yeah, I mean, since becoming Orthodox, I just like shoot off this phrase like "forgive me," like you know, thoughtlessly, because I hear it all the time. I hear Orthodox people ask each other for forgiveness all the time, and
Yeah.
in a way, that's beautiful. But
Yeah.
also, if you, like Anatolius is saying, if you kind of put this idea in some like Bible stories, you can start to feel, and kind of remove it from our modern context. You can start to feel like the, I don't know, the sort of like bad taste that it would leave it would leave you with. Like you say
Right.
transaction. I was just thinking about like, um Zacchaeus is such a good example of this. Like, he essentially robbed all these people. And when he encountered Jesus, he also encountered his sin. He encountered the fact that he had robbed so many people. But then he made it right. Uh, he is paying back these people, and more so. But I'm just imagining now, like, what if Zacchaeus had like given this money back, and then at the end of this transaction had said like, "Do you forgive me now?"
Right.
Uh, that would kind
Yeah.
of like
We wouldn't have liked
color
him
the
as much.
story. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Or like
um,
you see, like in the Old Testament, I remember like when Jacob and Esau come back together and stuff, right? It's just a reunion. They fall on each
yeah,
other's necks, they're hugging, they're so happy to see each other.
yeah,
It's not a, okay, now absolve me,
yeah,
forgive me, say it's okay. Say it's okay that this happened. It doesn't, that's not necessary. It's we'll move into the present, we'll live with this relationship. We're not necessarily gonna, I don't know, take everybody
yeah,
off the hook or something. It's
yeah,
funny. It is really interesting to ask for forgiveness benefits you, but really not the victim. Or I mean, the victim benefits from forgiving, but maybe
right.
that's
Right,
separate
but
from what
that's
you're
that's
asking them.
that's their journey. It's not
Yeah,
on us. And yeah, I mean, it does. That kind of speaks to the sacrament of confession too. That like the Christ and the Church understands that we need this sense of closure. We need the sense of like, okay, I have been forgiven,
right.
but it's only Christ who can give that, and thus
Right.
like it's really only Christ that we can ask that of.
Yeah.
Which, even you mentioned Forgiveness Sunday, it just occurs to me like the language is important. God forgives, and so do I.
Right.
That's the first standard. So yeah, yeah. Anatolius' essay complicates our notion of forgiveness first, and what he was taught in prison about victim empathy, and how maybe don't listen to that first impulse of asking forgiveness from the people that you've hurt. But then, secondly, uh, how do you yourself develop the practice of forgiveness when the people that matter most to you have not forgiven you. It's not like, I mean, at least for me, like I know there are some people probably 20 years ago that I hurt badly that probably will never forgive me. But also, like, that's 20 years ago. God willing, they've forgotten me, and moved on and had a beautiful life. Um, 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 but that's not what's happening with Anatolius' story. The people that are most central to him, are the people who are actively unable to forgive him. So how do you live with that?
Right.
How do you make a beautiful life, um, not just like on the other side of that lack of forgiveness, but in the ongoing tension. And I
Yeah.
think that's what his essay really complicates. And then there's kind of a third take, um, with his essay too, and then I think it complicates our notion of forgiveness in just the sense that with his particular crime, we we live in a culture that has an especially hard time forgiving people who have done this crime.
Hmm.
And uh, so I, it's hard. I am imagining people like myself, who have a hard time reading this objectively. Um, uh, Unlike the first two essays.
Yeah.
And that's intentional,
Yeah.
because the fourth part of this book, once you've had these like two really compelling, but ultimately feel good stories, and then this third like curveball, like what? um, uh, that's why the last part of this book, is not a narrative essay, but is, just this beautiful, um, system of prayer, called the Liturgy of Forgiveness. And it was first created by, um, uh, Schema Nun Silouan Vlad, of blessed memory, and, Karina Georgiou, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, um, was essentially her disciple, and did a lot of, like forgiveness workshops with her, that when this liturgy of forgiveness was being developed. And so Karina wrote this essay, sort of ushering the reader of Suffer With You through this liturgy of forgiveness. And then, um, Father John Kowalczyk, who has served with OCPM for so many years, and has so many, um, just miracle stories from serving as a chaplain, in prison, um, ties these themes in the liturgy of forgiveness to some of his real life examples that he's experienced in, with people who are incarcerated. So so yeah, that's kind of the journey of the book, is like you have these two stories that are bewildering but ultimately very redemptive. You have this third story that is very meaningful but definitely harder to read and does not have a happy ending. And then, at least for me, when my own kind of like notion of what forgiveness is, and also I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm not actually able to forgive the author of this last essay, and then like maybe there are other people I haven't yet forgiven. When these like sins get kind of kicked up by stories like this, um,
Right.
then you're led through the last part of the book, which is just a call to prayer, and, a call to make forgiveness a part of your real life, because that was a major project of this book. We ultimately didn't want just a collection of stories, or kind of like, um, things that we could look at, from an outside perspective. Our ultimate hope from the book was to change how you see people in prison, and to change how you see yourself, like people who are doing prison ministry experience all the time,
Right.
and then pray,
Right.
and together learn how to forgive.
Wow. Well, I think, it is really beautiful. If you tell just stories about prison, it is looking in from the outside, right? And if you're able to sort of bring us, first of all, it's first person narrative, so it kind of brings you in with them,
Yeah.
into like what if that was my situation? What if that was my past and that's what I
Totally.
had done?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's really neat. But then to also be able to bring you into it and make it this understanding that there's this human project that we're all participating in, that part of our Christian life. And really, I mean, it's posited here as really a very fundamental part of our Christian life and a major part of
Oh
us
yeah.
being able to interact with God. And I know you and I were talking before the show, and I was saying, Christ says, we have to forgive their trespasses, or God's not going to forgive our trespasses, right? Like the end of the Lord's Prayer. And then he repeats it afterwards to tell the apostles, like, no, really, if you want to be forgiven, you'll have to forgive. And it's such an interesting thing. And
Yep.
it's interesting too, I think is especially highlighted with the story of the pastor and the not receiving forgiveness. He's not
Mhm.
like going to get that comfort, but he actually does still have to receive forgiveness,
Yes.
because in his relationship with Christ, if he doesn't receive that forgiveness, then it's blocked. He,
Mhm.
that has to be, that's a major, that's how we're connected. And so it was sort of an interesting idea that, oh no, he has to be forgiven, but he really doesn't have to be forgiven by her.
Yeah.
You know, and it's an interesting article too, because or a narrative, because it's it's like there's some stuff he just doesn't talk about, right? Like some of it I'm
Yeah.
like, well, okay, you had a wife, you had a stepdaughter who was your victim. You had two kids who were given up to child services. Like none
Yeah.
of we don't know whether that what happened with them. And I actually kind of like that, because he's like sort of protecting privacy in that sense. But
Yeah.
it was interesting because it's like, okay, there are limited places where you're receiving forgiveness and reconciliation, and presumably the other places just aren't even there anymore. But I don't
Yeah.
know. It was interesting. I thought it was fair not to go into that, but it also felt like, wow, I wonder what this whole picture is like. You know, but how is this feeling for him on the outside, and what's that like? I don't know. You're right. We don't think a lot about forgiving crimes like that, because I think for so
Yeah.
many years, no one, you wouldn't even talk about it if there was something like this going on in a family, if there was some kind of, you know,
Right.
sexual misconduct. And so then there's this reactionary thing where now it's like, no, 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 you have to look at the victims. You have to think about this. You have to understand it's a big deal, which it is. But it's almost like we're not quite back to the middle yet. That is just understanding, yeah, this is a big deal. It's bad to be a victim. It's a big deal to be someone who needs to be forgiven for this. Like this is all people on all sides of it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but there are, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And
yeah.
there are
I was just
times
gonna
where
say
we
too.
struggle with.
Yeah. 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 What you're saying speaks a lot. I mentioned earlier about how um, I had the most interaction with Mikhail, going back and forth as this book was being created, which was over, I think, 3.5 years. Um, and uh, he he helped me so much, um, in reframing my mind about how this project was going to bless himself and bless other people. Um, so my background, I was an English professor before I worked at Orthodox Christian Prison Ministry. Um, I'm a writer. Most of my friends are writers, and so for me, like the way that I love the people closest to me is I love them through the books that they're working on. The most like affectionate thing I can say to someone is just like, wow, this paragraph is like solid. And I'm like, underlining all these things, and that's not one of the love languages, but that's like my love language
Yeah.
is really diving into like the text, because I understand like what people are putting themselves into. Um, but uh, Mikhail helped me understand how my own tendency to do that with his work, but then also with the other writers in this book, um, can't be the whole picture. So, uh, and the reason he said that is because I think maybe because I work with people who are writing like fiction, or I work with people who are writing essays about stories that happened like a while ago in their life. Um, what Mikhail helped me understand is he's like, my story hasn't ended. So he's saying, every time you like, uh, make a comment where you're talking about the text, or whatever,
Oh,
you're talking about my life that's still going on.
right.
Uh, and even, I mean, for him in like a very visceral way, he had an important court date while this book was being created, and he was like, look, like this, my essay could be like, evidence for or against me and in this court date. So so I this book has
Mm.
like very real, like current implications for my daily life, like right now. And the
Oh,
reason he wanted to tell me that was because, not just to criticize me, but he wanted to say, if I'm going to work with you in this book, I want to go way beyond, writer and editor.
yeah.
I want to feel you as my brother in Christ. Um, and It was very moving for me to hear that from him, and it changed the way that we wrote back and forth. How that has played out in the book, both with Mikhail and for Anatolius too, is that because my relationship to these people, um, thank God, went beyond writer and editor, um, and more as like brothers and sisters in Christ. Um, there were certain parts of Mikhail's story and of Anatolius's story, that, like you said, for people who are reading, might seem like this part's missing, or like if I was watching this in a movie, I would feel like there are a couple of like key scenes that are
Right.
not here. Why is
Right.
that? Um,
Right.
um,
Because it's
and
not,
so,
right?
yeah,
Because these are all real people still in
right,
it.
right,
Yeah.
but what Mikhail helped me understand, is he was like, well, I guess I'll just say this too. Uh, we sought some other counsel with the development of this book at one point in the process, and we heard from other people the same thing. Like these two, these key scenes are missing, and then the the details that we're being asked to write about, um, were visceral, like painful stuff to get into. And for me as a writer, I'm like, well, that's great. That's the stuff that's really going
Let's
to make
go.
people like, yeah,
That's
it's
gonna
like,
grab the audience. Let's go.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
Dostoevsky is a spiritual writer. I love Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky is
Yeah.
also a very violent writer. There, those two
Right.
things are together. So I'm like, game on. Let's do that. Um, but uh, but Mikhail helped me understand. He was like, look, brother, I I have I have faced these sins, uh, and I don't want to glory in them. The sins of my story are not the best parts of my story. Um,
And,
uh, and that was so important for me to hear. So that, uh, I hope I hope, that we've achieved that balance where there aren't just like any, blaring missteps where you feel
right.
like you're taken out of an essay or something. But I do want to say, like, um, the the shape of these essays between, the writer and the editor is very intentional, not just for the benefit of the reader, but for the livelihood of the people writing who are still living these stories. So, yeah,
And I
it's
noticed,
cool that you noticed that.
I think, yeah, it was interesting because I noticed it and I thought, oh, why do I want to know that? It's like a gossip thing or something. You know, I was
Yeah.
like, why am
Yeah.
I interested in like, because he's talking about how his daughter's not forgiving him. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, you have other children. Like, how do they feel? What's going on over there? But it's like,
Yes.
that's really not my business. It really doesn't matter. If he's chosen to tell me about this relationship, that's what he's writing about. And that's okay. Right. Like, we
Yeah.
don't always have a right to more information. In our culture, we feel like we do sometimes, right? Like with celebrities or whatever. If
Yeah.
there's something we want to know, we figure we ought to know it.
Yeah. Sure.
But maybe we don't need to know, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not to a point where you feel like someone's being like hiding something or not being honest. You can
Yeah.
sense that it's actually more, I'm just being confronted with, wow, look at
Yeah.
me, like wanting to know, like what's my motive for wanting to know this? But because there's not really like a, I don't know, a high moral, excellent reason for what, like, but it's a little bit noticeable, but I don't think it takes away from the story. I think,
Yeah.
especially with Mikhail, you really don't feel it. I
Yeah.
think just with the pastor, it was like, okay, Anatolius, there are other people, like there have to be other
Yeah.
people in the story. I know where they are, but I can't find them. But, uh, but
Yeah.
I think that's also a good thing to contemplate, right? And it's really a great point that not only that's a painful thing to delve into, but it's also someone else's privacy. Like maybe
Right.
there are other people in the family who don't want their story told, and they have
Yes.
a right not to have it told.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, I've had situations in our family where things have happened, and it's up to the victim. You decide how much they want you to tell, and that's how
Right.
much you can talk about. And I think that's a very fair and respectful thing. So it just goes to show it's real, right? Like if it were
Yes.
fiction, you could write whatever you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when it's real human beings, you have to think about who they are, what the consequences are to them, and
Yeah.
also what the consequences to the people around them might be.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's neat. I mean, they're really striking stories. It's really neat to be out there. These are not things you see very often. We don't often have access to think about, what is it like living with a crime? What is it that drew you into this sort of thing? And then how did you get out of it? But really that experience for them of coming to God and struggling through it, it's very beautiful and very inspiring. And it's so good that it turns then and it says, okay, now you, like, let's talk about you,
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that. And it's really inviting you into the kind of like transformative relationship with God that they have, which is amazing. It's so beautiful. And I love that it's really accessible, right? Like the liturgy of forgiveness, like these are things you can do. Like you go through this, there are meditations in it. It's
Yeah. It's
asking you
simple. Yeah.
questions, right? The book stops. It's like, okay, what are you thinking about? What do you think about this? And I love it. I think it's really neat. I think if there are people out there who are struggling with forgiveness, and I know there are because I have a number of friends who are,
Yeah.
it's not always a big drama. It's not, there wasn't a murder. Maybe there wasn't a huge, nobody went to prison, but we hurt each other all the time. And we do
Yeah.
commit violent acts or emotionally violent acts or, whoever hates his brother is a murderer, right? Like, so we've all done it. We've all
Yeah.
been victim to it. And it is so hard. And I think our culture is funny because, like we were saying, we might ask for forgiveness a lot, I guess. Although I'm thinking about when I was raising
Yeah.
my kids when they were young, it was really important to me that they asked each other for forgiveness. When
Uh-huh.
someone, like if they hit somebody, hit their sister, it was like, okay, go say you're sorry, ask for forgiveness. And
Yeah.
it's like, you know, that's interesting. And yet, maybe we kind of really do struggle with forgiveness. Like maybe we're doing this sort of lip service thing. We're like, oh, forgive me, but we're not really
Yeah.
thinking about what does it mean for me to accept forgiveness from God and then
Yeah.
to pass forward that forgiveness. It's kind of like you can't give what you don't receive, right? Like if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to pass it around. But
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. That really that yeah. So I don't want to get off the show before I mention that we've I hope one of the words that you have heard often through the show is intentionality. That we were intentional with a lot of different choices with this book, and the release date of this book is no less intentional. So the the book is available for pre-order now. You can visit our website at the OCPM, so THEOCPM.org. Lent.com/suffer with you. And that's how you can find the book to pre-order. But yeah, we wanted to start, sharing this book during the season of Lent, for it to finally like hit the shelves on Bright Monday. And the whole the whole sorry, I just kind of get goosebumps when I think about the timing of this, because it's been a journey, getting this book out. So I'm so grateful that it has worked out, to come out at this season, because yeah, like you're saying, I mean, of all the things that we're trying to do in Great Lent as Orthodox Christians, all these like, extra prayers, extra alms, all of this extra that we're called to do. I for me personally, it's still hard to get just to the very basic thing of just like receiving Christ's forgiveness. And that's it happens every year, where in Lent I'm really focused on all these things that I can do and strive for, and then you get to Holy Week, and almost none of that matters. Like, not
Right.
you're I love that the church has broken up this season where Holy Week is not a part of Great Lent, because once you finally get to Holy Week, it's it's sort of the church saying like, sit down. And I mean, we still stand, but in a metaphorical way, like get out of the way. It's time for you to just witness what Christ is still doing. Christ is still getting on the cross for you and this body of people. And that is, man, for all the Sunday school songs that we have, and all the things that are just so basic about just receiving Christ's love, receiving Christ's forgiveness. It is still, at least for me, is still the hardest thing to do. And so if this book can be, can help one person like get one step closer to genuinely receiving Christ's forgiveness, and then being able to share that forgiveness with other people, may it be blessed. That would be a total success to me.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it's going to be a total success then. If that's what it
Yeah.
requires, you're going to
Yeah.
get it. But gosh, that's beautiful about Holy Week. That's really true. And that Lent is, you're doing all of this stuff very into. I always find that Lent is really good for me for looking for forgiveness, because it just sort of reminds me that I'm just not good enough at these things.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not putting enough energy in. I don't do it well enough. I don't like, I'm whining about fasting. Why am I whining about this? Why do I care? And it just, it makes you face your brokenness. But Holy Week, you turn and you look to Christ. And
Yeah.
it really is just beautiful. But it's
Yeah.
good that you're broken down through Lent, so that when you
Totally.
get there, you're
Yeah.
good and tired and you're just totally focused. But
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, that's great. So this is Suffer With Me at the the OCPM.org.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
a link on the show notes too, so
Yep.
people
That
can
sounds
find
good.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's beautiful. I've read the book. It's amazing. I love it.
Thank you so
So
much. I'm really encouraged to hear that.
I'm super encouraged just by the book and by talking with you, and it really has opened up a lot of thought about how foundational forgiveness is in the Christian life, and how
Absolutely.
this is,
Yep.
and of course it is, right? Like the whole central act, right? Your sins are forgiven, right? That's the thing.
Right.
So it makes sense. It makes sense, but oddly enough, we may not think about it deeply enough. So this will help. This
Yep.
is cool. Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I like talking to you, and I love the OCPM. You guys do beautiful work, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Elisa.